Do you remember the fable of the tortoise and the hare, the race? You have the flashy, overconfident hare that speeds ahead, the slow and steady tortoise that plods along. These two characters have become metaphors for work. On the one hand, it's all about the fast sprints, first to market share, scale aggressively. And the other is a marathon of effort, deep work, slow productivity. If you're like me, you feel the tug on both sides. You run fast trying to keep up, then burn out. Or you slow down for focus, but worry you're being left behind. No matter how I tried to run this race, something always felt off. Because maybe it's not about being a tortoise or a hare. Maybe it's the terrain itself has changed. The world we live in now is no longer a straight, predictable track. It feels more like a maze that reconfigures itself while you're still inside of it. The path ahead might be a swamp, Mount Everest, or disappear completely. And that's when I realized I wasn't meant to run or to walk. I was meant to fly. Like a dragonfly who sees the whole terrain. The dragonfly has up to 30,000 lenses in each of their eyes, allowing it to see in all directions in multiple light spectrums. It processes motion at 200 frames a second, predicting patterns before it happens, making it one of the most accurate hunters on Earth. Now that is a kind of vision we need for the problems our world is seeing. And in the human world, that's how the generalist operates. To understand how vital this way of seeing, we need to rewind. Think back Renaissance era. Being a broad thinker wore a badge of honor. We celebrated people like Leonardo da Vinci, who was successful not just because he was a master at everything, but because he was a master connector. He took inspiration for his art through anatomy, engineering principles to enhance architecture, or looked to nature for design. Then came industrialization. We needed repetition, efficiency, precision. We broke work into parts and created assembly lines. We built schools to train for one job. Careers on a ladder. You became a thing, a coder, a teacher, an accountant. The goal was master your field and specialize. And then somewhere along the way, the generalists got lost. The curious kid in kindergarten, now called unfocused in grade 1. The one that jumped across ideas or careers, now called distracted. And the one that dared to ask, why are we doing it this way? Shut down with, because we always have. The generalist didn't disappear, it just stopped fitting in. Specialization was great for its time. I mean, we trained surgeons to master a single delicate procedure, engineers to optimize every millimeter of the circuit board. We built careers on the promise that clarity comes from narrowing the lane. Then complexity showed up. Climate change isn't just about environment. It's economical, political, social. Healthcare isn't just about medicine. It's logistics, equity, technology. And problems that span multiple departments get tossed around like a hot potato because it doesn't care about our org charts or artificial boundaries. It lives in the spaces in between. And so in a world that trained tortoises and hares to look straight ahead, never gave space or created the dragonfly that looks up, sees all around, and sees those problems in between or those opportunities, living in between the spaces. I saw this firsthand. Early in my career, I was the head of corporate training, supporting the development of a corporate risk framework. My role was to document and support the rollout, or translation, glorified note taker. At the table sat the head of every risk domain, all deep, brilliant experts. But as the meetings unfolded, something was clear. We were going in circles. Because everybody brought their own lens, their own language to the conversation. So I did what generalists do. I got curious, diving into books, articles, asking questions, reframing the conversation, understanding the terrain. And once we presented the framework to the CEO that represented everybody's expertise, the CEO leaned over at me and said, "Not sure how, but I know it was you who herded the cats." And that moment stuck with me, not for the compliment, but for what it represents. Generalists are so often underestimated. Not because they don't contribute, because their contribution looks different. Generalists exist in every organization, every industry, but they're not seen for what they bring. Tell me if this scenario is familiar to you. You or a colleague have worked really hard on a plan. You are finally ready to execute. And you're presenting and somebody says, "Hey, what if you did this other thing instead?" Or they question why the plan was created in the first place. Raise your hand if you know exactly what I mean. All right, I call those cross-pollinating shit disturbers. AKA generalist. They ask questions no one dared to ask. They see gaps that no one else saw. And they dare to reframe or pivot at the worst possible time. Often because they weren't invited in the conversation early enough. Which brings me to what a generalist truly is. It is not a box on the org chart. It's a way of thinking, a way of seeing the whole terrain that creates this connective tissue across the domains. Another way to look at it, specialists think in verticals, and we need that. But generalists cut across horizontally. Or specialists are like laser beams, sharp and precise, delivering targeted results. Generalists, disco balls, throwing light everywhere, illuminating the connections. But sadly, too often our reaction to all those generalist questions are to shove them aside. The system makes them feel like misfits, so they learn to play their part and stay in their lane. Or they leave the organization, become podcasters. So what if we flipped it? Instead of boxing generalists into lanes, what if we gave them airspace instead? Imagine hiring not just for what a person can do, but for how many domains they can connect. Measuring success, not just on KPIs, but for how well they could see around the corner. And this isn't hypothetical. Organizations are already experimenting with skills-based approaches to their workforce. They're hiring and promoting based on what a person can do, not the degrees they hold or titles they've had. Instead of boxing people into roles, they're creating talent marketplaces, a matchmaking process matching skills to projects. They're making space for generalists. And not just organizations. Canada's political leadership took the boldest silo-busting move yet. Traditionally, a prime minister issues one mandate letter to each of his cabinet ministers. Health gets its plans, immigration gets theirs, everyone is handed their silo. But when Mark Carney became Canada's prime minister in 2025, he broke that tradition. Instead of custom to-do lists, he issued one shared mandate letter to the entire cabinet. They had 7 interconnected goals. Carney asked his ministers to stop racing in separate lanes and see the whole terrain. I say, if you want bold cross-cutting solutions, you need the dragonflies in the room. Because a letter on its own is not going to shift the system. You need to think differently too. And that's where the generalist thinking comes in. In my consulting career and podcasts, I talk to generalists all over the world, from CEO to early career professionals. As generalists, we've all worn the label, jack of all trades, master of none. What I learned is, what is truly being mastered is stopping wasted efforts. So the specialist can put their brilliance to where it has the most impact. I'll share with you 3 stories that show the generalist thinking in action. As I do, think about the generalists around you, or perhaps recognize your own superpowers. I spoke with Marie, who was watching the healthcare system crumble. Everyone around her was fixing the machine, higher throughput, better efficiencies. Marie stepped back and said, "Are we solving the right problems?" She stopped seeing healthcare as a machine to fix but rather an ecosystem, which means the solution isn't about doctors and nurses necessarily, but transit operators or social workers and everyone that touches the system. That's where generalists excel. They'll step back, look at the entire puzzle, see where all the pieces fit. So that's our first superpower. We reframe the problem. I will always remember my conversation with Brian, a senior project manager. He told me about a time where everything was messy. Too many voices, too many moving parts, too much jargon. And he was doing what generalists do best, asking questions, poking at assumptions, why are you doing it that way? And he started questioning, am I really helping or just making things worse? And that's when the client leaned in and said, oh, you're helping us, all right. You're helping us untangle the Christmas lights. Great, right? When the room gets foggy, the generalist brings clarity. They use shared language, pulling analogies from history, science, pop culture if we have to, so everyone can see the same picture. That's our second superpower. We untangle complexity. When I spoke with Jason, a cybersecurity compliance specialist, he said, generalists are better at detecting fraud. Really? How? He says, they link things others dismiss. A headline in the news, an odd detail in a report, a story from a colleague. Where others see random dots, the generalists see the constellation. And this is what brings me to what the generalist truly is. It is not just about breadth. It's about connecting the dots. Just like the dragonfly, we sift through lots of information, find patterns, and anticipate what might come next. That's our third superpower. We spot patterns others miss. So in a world where it's only getting faster, more complicated, interconnected, let's have the generalist fly. First, we reframe the problem, shifting the team to where it matters most. Second, we untangle the complexity, turning the mess into something the team can work with. And third, we spot patterns, allowing us to find lasting solutions. So here's the invitation. Leaders, when the generalist asks those inconvenient questions, lean in and say, tell me more. Let's make space for generalists. And specialists, partner with them. They're your best advocate, translator, and connector. And generalist, be the dragonfly. Stay wide, stay curious, and above all, stay the cross-pollinating shit disturber this world needs.